Um, all right, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have a really great number of people in the event. So my name is Chris Fettner, and I'm the Managing Director of the Entertainment Globalization Association. We are an association of over 100 companies and about 500 individual members that provide some part of the localization process for entertainment. So that's dubbing companies, subtitling companies, translators, dubbing directors, and we're all focused on helping to share really great stories with global audiences. So as part of that, making sure that global audiences have a great audio experience is really important. And we're so grateful that Dolby is a sponsoring member and that they've agreed to come and talk to our members and invited guests about Dolby ATMOS and sort of how that fits into the localization process. So we're really grateful to have Dolby, and we thank them very much for their time today. And with that, I would like to introduce Ron Geller, who leads the content liaison program for Dolby ATMOS. So Ron, I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chris, and thanks to you and the EGA for allowing us to spend a few minutes here. We're very excited here to be talking about Dolby ATMOS and language dubbing. I'm Ron Geller. I'm the Vice President of Worldwide Content Relations based in Burbank, California, here for Dolby. So we're gonna jump right in with some of my Dolby colleagues. It's great to see so many people here from the studio side, from the localization vendor community. We're so glad to have the opportunity to partner with all of you, with both sides of the ecosystem, if you will, to hopefully make Dolby ATMOS language dubbing a win-win for everyone involved. As we go on to the agenda, Tom McAndrew, also based in Burbank, California, is going to talk us through an overview of Dolby ATMOS and how it kind of fits into the larger Dolby story. Then Rich Marty is going to give us a brief overview of content in Dolby ATMOS, which of course is a prerequisite to be talking about dubbing in Dolby ATMOS. We're really pleased to have Javier Foncillas here. He's the head of Dolby Europe, who's going to give us a European consumer's perspective on Dolby ATMOS and languages and dubbing. And then finally, we'll go back to Tom again, who's going to talk workflow, Dolby ATMOS workflows and how dubbing will fit into those workflows. So then at the end, we should have time left over for Q&A. So if you see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box for you to type in questions throughout, and then we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. So find the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll answer them at the end when we can, and maybe even during the session through text if possible. But enough about that. Why don't we get started? And I'm going to turn it over to Tom McAndrew.
Thanks a lot, Ron, and welcome everyone. We appreciate your all time in joining us, and we hope to give you a really interesting overview here. So first of all, I'm just going to talk about who we are as Dolby. This is our mission statement. We advance the science of sight and sound to enable spectacular experiences. Without great storytelling, technology is nothing. But we really feel that great technology can enhance great storytelling, and that's kind of our mission. So we were founded in London by Ray Dolby in around 1965, and we're currently based in San Francisco with offices all around the world, about 2,300 employees, and a full third of us pretty much are scientists and engineers. That's the level of dedication that Dolby really gives to experimentation and trying new things and just inventing cool new stuff. And that's something we're really proud of as Dolby employees. We have a great history of innovation between patents and Emmys and Oscars, and over 35,000 feature films actually feature some sort of Dolby technology. So we have a long-standing history with the entertainment industry. And just to kind of give you an overview of all our technologies, I'm not going to go through all of these point by point, but I want to kind of give you an idea of the pattern of technology development and where it goes. So like I said, we were founded in 1965 in London, and Ray Dolby's first mission was just make recorded music sound better, just get rid of that magnetic tape hiss that you would always hear on tapes. And so we brought that to the cinema in 1971 with A Clockwork Orange. And then Dolby noise reduction came home. Everybody of a certain age remembers on their cassette decks that little Dolby B or Dolby C noise reduction button. So we developed technologies in the cinema, and then we bring it home. In 1977, Star Wars opened with Dolby Stereo, which was our first major theatrical surround sound format. And then later on, Dolby Stereo came home to broadcast and things like a VHS tape. 1992, Dolby Digital came out with Batman Returns, and the Dolby Digital once again came home. So again, that's the pattern of our technology. We establish something in the cinema, and then we bring it home. Now in 2012, Dolby Atmos came out with Pixar's Brave. And then a few years later, we brought that home on Blu-ray disc and then ultimately on streaming services. So I want to flash all the way forward to 2019. That was a big year for us. It was actually a big month for us in November. Just in that 1 month, Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus launched with both Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision. And then Amazon Prime Music, as well as Tidal, debuted Dolby Atmos Music. So Dolby Atmos has been growing in the home since 2014, but it's really exploded of late. So there's a really rich content creation as well as consumer electronics ecosystem that we're going to talk about. So let me describe, first of all, just at a high level view for those who don't know just what the technology is, what Dolby Atmos is. When we developed Atmos, we didn't want to just create another channel-based surround sound format. You know, we went from mono to stereo to Dolby Surround to 5.1, 7.1. We didn't want to just create another X.1 channel-based format. We wanted to develop something that would be a little more future-proof and a little bit truer to creative intent in every listening environment. So we developed Dolby Atmos, which is special for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's sound all around you, not just around, but also overhead. It's truly three-dimensional surround sound. In addition to that, not only is it a three-dimensional surround sound, but it's what we call object-based audio. So, you know, previously audio was always channel-based and sounds were mixed to speaker channels. With object-based audio, each audio object, each piece of sound that we refer to as an object is mixed with positional metadata. If you think about your high school geometry with X, Y, and Z coordinates in space, and all of the audio objects are mixed with positional metadata that travels with the mix all the way back to the playback environment. And the reason that's important is every playback environment is different, whether it's a cinema or a dub stage, or someone's living room with a home theater system, or a sound bar, or just in a television. Every room is different in terms of number of speakers and location of speakers. So the positional metadata for all the audio objects travels to the decoding environment, and the decoder in each individual environment knows how many speakers there are and where they are. So audio objects don't always come out the same speaker channel. They come out the correct point in space, which in one room might be one speaker, another room might be another speaker, or a combination of speakers to create a virtual location. So that's kind of the magic of object-based audio, and it's how it preserves creative intent. So we think that's really important to be able to deliver the truest creative intent regardless of the playback environment. So how do we bring that home? If you've been to a Dolby Atmos cinema, the room looks something like this: speakers all around you and then 2 rows of speakers overhead. Now, we know most people in their homes are not going to be chopping holes in their ceilings and actually installing speakers in the ceiling. So we have a companion technology, Dolby-enabled speakers. It fires sound up and bounces it off the ceiling and then down to the listening position to create the illusion of sound coming from overhead. If you look behind me, you'll actually see one of my up-firing speakers there in my living room. That's how most people at home will get a Dolby Atmos experience, not necessarily with surround sound systems, but with other types of doodads that we'll get into a little bit later. We'll get into it right now. So here are different types of Dolby Atmos playback devices, from sound bars to full-on home theater systems to little add-on modules that you place on top of speakers you already own, like you see behind me, and even Atmos built right into televisions. Now, I don't want you to think this represents the entirety of Atmos listening environments, because these all are kind of high-end looking devices. Dolby Atmos is truly mainstream at this point with, for example, entry-level sound bars. If you walk into a big box store like a Costco in the US here, you almost the first thing you literally see is a stack of Dolby Atmos capable sound bars stacked up to the ceiling at price points as low as $300 US. And outside of all these types of devices, Dolby Atmos is in smartphones and laptops and smart speakers. So mobile, PC, tablet, lots of different types of devices are enabled to give Dolby Atmos listening experience. So on TVs alone, Dolby Atmos is growing by leaps and bounds. We actually have Atmos built right into televisions, and the drivers are placed and the audio is presented such that you still get an immersive surround environment just coming from the television. And in Europe, Philips, Panasonic, Sony, all UHD TVs, these include Dolby Atmos. So at this point, I'm going to toss over to Rich Marty, and he's going to dive a little bit farther into the consumer electronics ecosystem and also the content ecosystem. So go ahead and take it away, Rich.
Great. All right. Well, hello, everyone. And, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We just thought it would be helpful to take you through the landscape of Atmos content that has been made available to consumers, both from the theatrical side and also for the home. So, well, first, we'll start with theatrical. Maybe we'll advance on to the next slide real quick. So for theatrical, this would have been in either a Dolby enabled Atmos theater or a Dolby cinema experience. But like Tom said, dating back to 2012, there have been now over 1,800 titles released theatrically with Dolby Atmos. From the first title, Brave, to the majority of ongoing new release titles like Godzilla vs. Kong, which just was released, or Raya and the Last Dragon, or even library remastered releases such as The Matrix or the upcoming Scott Pilgrim versus the World. There's been a wide range of titles for consumers to experience premium audio in the theater. And the good news here is that for theatrical Atmos releases, there are normally a wide range of foreign Atmos languages, which are made available for consumers to experience in their local countries. So as we shift gears to movies made for the home, we'll go on to the next one. You can see that there are already over 1,000 titles that have been made available to consumers with Atmos to date. So there's a good, consistent list of new movies being made available each month. And they're being made available from across all the major studios and a long list of independents. The releases are being made available digitally, which would be on transactional sites such as Apple, Vudu, Rakuten, subscription services like Netflix or Disney Plus. And then, as Tom also mentioned, on physical discs. So it could be on Blu-ray or 4K Ultra HD. So as we move on, consumers are actually really coming to expect this premium audio experience here in the US. You can see per Nielsen, all of the top 10 movies streamed last year were in Dolby Atmos and actually Dolby Vision, but that's a separate topic for another time. But again, people here are really, the mainstream movies, the movies they're watching, they all have Dolby Atmos as well. So in addition to movies being made available, there's also now episodic originals being made available for Dolby Atmos. Titles like The Man or One Barbecue on Netflix. So content creators are really seeing the same importance of including high quality Atmos audio to tell the best versions of their stories for episode TV, just like feature films. But stepping back, the one challenge, or you could look at it as an opportunity to take note across both these home movies and episodic shows, is that the majority of all of this content for the home is in English Atmos only. Only select blockbuster movies or series from Apple TV Plus include foreign Atmos languages. So a good number of international consumers are getting the foreign language Atmos experience in the theater, but not so much in the home. So there's really an enormous amount of content that exists, and it just keeps coming and forthcoming, but it really could lend itself to Atmos foreign languages. So as we look at the platforms, consumers now have a wide range of platforms to access content. Again, from platforms with global reach, such as Netflix, Apple TV Plus, and Disney Plus, to European platforms such as Rakuten, and Sky, and give global reach to the platform. 99% of the world can actually access, and for the majority of these consumers, English is their first language. So to talk maybe a little bit more about that international experience, maybe I'll pass it now on to Javier Foncillas from Dolby Europe. He's based in Madrid, and he'll speak a little specifically more about the perspective from Europe. So I'll hand it over to Javier.
Okay, thank you, Rich. So yeah, as Rich was saying, in Europe, we're enjoying a lot of Hollywood content. But if we move on to the next slide, one of the things I wanted to share with you is we're also starting to get a lot of local production in Atmos from local companies. I mean, I just wanted to highlight two big companies here. So on the left, I have Movistar, which is the pay TV branch of Telefonica. They're pretty much doing all their new productions in Atmos. They've been doing that for quite a few years. I'm highlighting some of the series they've been producing, like La Peste or Gigantes or Hierro, which is one of the big hits this year. So these series are all produced in Dolby Atmos in Spanish original. Now, on the right, just to showcase maybe what's going on in which was one of the big hits in Germany. The third series we produced in Atmos, and because of the success of that, they're actually going back and recreating some of the older seasons. I've also highlighted some of the other ones like the Paz or Achtage or Hausen. So we're seeing that more and more pay TV providers who sponsor their own content are producing it in Atmos. So consumers are growing accustomed that also local language content can be in Dolby. Also in the home. We move on to the next page. Now, one of the interesting thing, we always get asked the question, but do consumers really want to dub in Atmos? I mean, we've got the English one in Atmos. So are customers really demanding these local dubs in Atmos? And I think, customers in Europe now consider Atmos to be a core feature. And we decided to do like the simple online search. Just, you can find in social media about Atmos and it doesn't take a wizard to actually find interesting comments. This is just a simple search I did. This one was in Spain. And some of the quotes here are great. In Spanish, ¿y qué series tienen en español en formato Atmos? Why do I only find English? So what series have Spanish Dolby Atmos? Why only do I find this version? We need the 4K version with Spanish Atmos, please. And then they're finally lucky and find something in Atmos. Their comments is like, wow, what a show in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos in Spanish. So people, I think, are really appreciating the local dubs when they find them. Now, not just in Spain, here we've got some examples from France. I mean, France has a VOD in Atmos. They were one of the first pay TV providers in the world to actually launch Atmos. So they've been growing the catalog for a while, and of course in France we find some of the same thing. Dolby Atmos for one series that you offer never in Dolby Atmos in French language. So pretty much the same thing repeating itself. But Germany, same thing. I think it's a common trend. Any country where Atmos is becoming popular, people start to look for the local language stuff. In very AVR friendly, I quite like this quote that says, it shows Atmos during these years. So yeah, they're so why is this happening? So if we move on to the next chart, we'll get a feel as to why this is happening. Now, this chart compares the sales of Atmos equipment in Europe, that's TVs, AVRs, soundbars, versus the traditional systems. So, for the last 3-4 years, Atmos capable devices have outsold the more traditional home theater variants. If you look at the last column here, the last quarter, so Q3, which is the last quarter, have most devices actually outsold traditional 5171 systems 9-1. So the market is really buying Atmos versus the traditional AVR solution. Now, thinking about 5.1 is the audio standard, and then maybe Atmos is the additional version I sometimes do. But I hope you'll agree with me from this chart that Atmos devices in the living room now far outweigh 5.1 devices. So it's really become the new standard for content creation. And like I said, this is really driven by one new device, that's the Atmos TV, that I'll get into in the next page. So yeah, why the Atmos device is seeing this spectacular growth? Now, this is mainly due to the introduction of 4K Atmos TVs. Now, these are TVs that are capable of natively playing Atmos soundtracks without the need of any additional equipment. No cables, no HDMI, nothing. It works out of the box. It always works. So there's never the issue that we always had with some of the legacy systems. I mean, part of the reason why we're able to grow so much in the TV market is the current cycle of upgrading to 4K TVs. Now, we've managed to piggyback on that cycle, and our focus has been to ensure that the new TVs have Atmos capability. And as this chart shows, we've actually been very successful. The majority of the brand new TVs that are being designed right now have Atmos as part of the design specs. And that's why you see this growth here. As newer models come to market, the percentage of 4K TVs being sold actually increases. Now, we expect that we're probably somewhere around 30% 4K TVs, if not now, later on this spring. Now, part of the reason for this high growth is a lot of the brands are now introducing very mainstream affordable models. Now, in particular, there's a company called Vestel that makes TVs in Turkey, and they're actually Europe's largest TV manufacturer. Most people don't know this company because it usually sells under a supermarket brand, or they sometimes use legacy brands that they've licensed like Toshiba and JVC. But their market share in some countries is up to 40%, as is in the case of the UK. So they're actually the biggest UK seller of TVs. We're in a similar situation in France, in Germany, in Spain, in Italy. So that's one of the reasons why we're continue to see this growth. Not only it's the LGs, Panasonic, Sony, all the kind of famous tier 1 brands, but a lot of the more mainstream affordable TVs are also coming with Atmos built in from the factory. So that's pretty much in summary, what's going on in Europe. We have a significant number of European homes now equipped with Atmos devices. And because more and more services are making Atmos available, customers are demanding it in a local language, just like we've traditionally done for all the other types of content. So Atmos has now become the new standard for high-end audio in Europe, and people now expect it. So that's pretty much it for me. I'll be happy to take your questions later on, but now back to Tom.
Thanks a lot, Javier, and thanks, Rich. So now we're going to actually dive into the professional ecosystem and Dolby Atmos content creation tools. And I'll show you what tools are available in the marketplace. And at the end, I'll actually give a demonstration of a Dolby Atmos mix session. Let's see here. There we go. So the heart of a Dolby Atmos mix is the Atmos renderer. And there are two Dolby products that are available to render in mix rooms. One is the very high-end solution, and the other is the the affordable mainstream solution. The first one, the Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite, is a full hardware and software solution intended for premier mix rooms. And the Mastering Suite is available for Mac and PC. The IOs are available with Madi or Dante. And it includes 3 seats of Dolby Atmos Production Suite, which is the mainstream solution. Mastering Suite is available from our authorized Dolby reseller network around the world. So again, that second solution is Dolby Atmos Production Suite, which can honestly do most of what the Mastering Suite does at a much lower cost of entry. Both products allow mixers to mix and print Dolby Atmos master files, as well as monitor lower re-renders like 5.1 in stereo, and also create channel-based re-render masters from the Atmos master file afterwards offline. And this is the important thing we really want to communicate. This is the best overall workflow for mixers for their content creation customers. You mix Atmos first, even if there isn't an immediate need, and then perform 5.1 or stereo re-renders afterwards. So we're starting to see the professional ecosystem shift to a single deliverable rather than multiple channel configuration deliveries from the mix facility. And then re-renders are generated by the content owners on an as-needed basis. It's already happening with original language versions, and we expect, and we also encourage that workflow to follow to international dubbing as well. So Production Suite, which is what I'm going to show you shortly, it runs on a Mac laptop. It's optimized for basically all but the most complex mix projects. And it's available on the Avid store for $299 US. And if you go to developer.dolby.com, you want to try it out, you can get a free 3-month demo. So studios frequently already have a Dolby Atmos M&E for most of their new A titles, as well as catalog titles. So marrying an M&E to a foreign dialogue stem is, I mean, to oversimplify a little bit, it's essentially a 2-finger mix. Now you can spend some time doing dialogue panning and room reverbs to the dialogue stem, but an experienced mixer won't really need much more time to do this in Atmos than in 5.1. So with a 5.1 M&E, you get a 5.1 dub. With an Atmos M&E, you get a great Dolby Atmos dub. And if you need to render out a 5.1 or a stereo from the Atmos, it's an automatic offline process. And you know, that overall workflow at the end of the day really makes everybody happy. So as I alluded to earlier, the Dolby Atmos renderer toolset allows you to easily re-render your Atmos mix to 5.1, stereo, stems, M&Es, whatever you need, and as an offline process rather than as real-time print mastering. And the renderer also has re-render trim controls so that a mixer can optimize the re-renders. But you know, the really cool thing is most mixers aren't even using them because they're happy with the re-renders, faithfulness to the creative intent without any tweaking required. It's kind of a bummer for our software developers who spend a lot of time on this feature, but it's a real testament to the quality of how Dolby Atmos naturally folds down to channel-based re-renders. And here's a facility that we're really happy to see is already ready to rock international dubs in Dolby Atmos. This is from an EGA newsletter from just a few weeks ago. Victor Martinez, who's the managing director of the Kitchen in Madrid, said 2 quotes that when we read them, we were like, yes. If a production is made originally in Atmos, now we're able to create the dubbed version in Atmos too. And also Dolby Atmos capabilities also let us offer our customers the one mix fits all systems work in process, where one Atmos mix can easily, in many cases automatically, be down mixed to 7.1, 5.1, 2-channel, and so on. So, so Victor, if you're here, thank you so much for those quotes, and we wish you the best of luck with your new Dolby Atmos near field mix room. So, very briefly, for the mixers out there, I want to run down the different digital audio workstations that are compatible with Dolby Atmos. First and most common is Avid's Pro Tools. They were the first to become Dolby Atmos capable, and the deep integration with their S6 console is really fantastic. So Pro Tools works with Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite and Production Suite, and it includes a non-real-time offline rendering capability. So once you finish your mix, you can basically press a button and go to lunch, and it will create your master files offline. It can import ADM B-Wave Dolby Atmos master files and basically turn them back into a Pro Tools session. So if you have your Dolby Atmos master file and you need to make changes, maybe do a censorship cut or add head or tail logos, that kind of thing, you can import that master file into Pro Tools and it turns itself back into a full session with all of the automation and everything. And it's compatible with the Dolby Atmos Music Panner when you're using the Production Suite or Mastering Suite. The next solution is Steinberg Nuendo. And here you see the Dolby Atmos Panner that Steinberg developed for Nuendo. Again, it works with Mastering Suite and Production Suite, but it also includes native rendering capability for monitoring. So listening to your Dolby Atmos mix room, you don't need Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite or Production Suite. It can import and author 80 MB wave Atmos master files. So again, you don't need Mastering Suite or Production Suite to monitor or to render the master file. But it works with Dolby Atmos Music Panner when you are using Production Suite or Mastering Suite. And finally, DaVinci Resolve, with possibly the most flexibility for not only mixing and mastering Dolby Atmos, but also QCing and doing audio and video master packaging, including with Dolby Vision. So again, it works with Mastering Suite and Production Suite. It has native rendering capability for monitoring, so no DAPs or DAMs required. It can import and export basically any type of Dolby Atmos master file, the original DAMP package format, 80 MB wave, and also the IAB file format, which is intended for IMF container master files for mixing. So it can import and export all of those file types by itself without Mastering Suite or Production Suite. It can also import master files to the nonlinear editor timeline for QC and cut-only editing. You can even do mezzanine QC for not only Dolby Atmos, but Dolby Vision or any other video type, just all in that one timeline. And finally, it can deliver IMF packages with Atmos IMF IAB files. And the Atmos capable version, $300 US. So it's a real Swiss Army knife product that we're really glad has added those Dolby Atmos capabilities. So is it time to upgrade your Dolby Atmos mix room? It's really not nearly as daunting as it may sound. So here's a QR code, and if you scan that code, it will take you to the webpage that has our downloadable room design guide. Or contact me if you have any questions. But the room design guide has all the recommendations for room volumes, speaker and amplifier power recommendations, recommended angles from the speakers to the mix positions. Anything you possibly need to design your Dolby Atmos mix room is in that document. And once again, grab that QR code and you can download that doc. And it's not requirements for a Dolby Atmos mix room. Our recommended speaker configuration is a minimum of 7.1.4. That is traditional home theater 7.1 with 4 overhead speakers. And the document describes, again, all the recommended room volumes, amp and speaker power, but we recognize this may not be affordable in some markets. So as long as there's an understanding of monitoring expectations and capabilities between mixed facilities and clients, an Atmos room in some markets could be 5.1 with 4 overheads or 5.1.2. In extreme cases, like emerging markets, even binaurally rendered files in Mastering Suite or Production Suite and monitoring with headphones could even be an option. So at that point, we're going to actually jump out and go to the Dolby Atmos mixing environment. So let me stop sharing my PowerPoint here and let me push some buttons. Sorry, folks, this will take just a moment. And then let me reshare this screen. And there we go. Okay, thanks for that. So what we see here is a Pro Tools session, as well as the Dolby Atmos Production Suite renderer. And by the way, I'm running all of this on my MacBook Pro laptop. So it's a simple portable solution. And with the Dolby Atmos binaural renderer that exists in the Production Suite, the used car salesman in me says you can actually do Dolby Atmos sound design and light mixing with headphones while you're sitting on an airplane, but not the recommended workflow. What you see here is a Pro Tools session that I've mocked up as a international dub style session. First of all, you have your M&E, which is composed of beds and objects. So let me step back a little bit. Dolby Atmos mix is generally composed of what we refer to as beds and objects. Now the beds are the traditional channel-based portion of the mix. So it's a 9.1 bed, which is left, center, right, a pair of sides, a pair of rears, and then a subwoofer and stereo overheads. So left overhead total, right overhead total. So those sounds are actually mixed to speaker channels. So those are the beds. And then you have objects, and you can have up to 118 simultaneous objects in a mix. But here we have a set of beds that came in with the M&E. and then a 5.0 dialogue stem, which would have been provided from a territory. And so you see it laid out there. Now over in the renderer, what you're looking at here is all of these tracks from 1 down through 128. Those are all the available audio lanes. The groups with purple boxes around them, those indicate bed groupings. Some mixes might actually have separate beds for stems, a set of beds for dialogue, music, and effects. Here we have an M&E bed as well as a dialogue stem bed, and then all of the object tracks laid out. So if I just go ahead and hit play right here, I'm going to show you a little bit about the interface. First of all, this is a three-dimensional rendering of what the room actually looks like. And when I hit play on this Pro Tools session, you're not going to hear the mix well over Zoom, but what you're going to see are little green balls that are being animated in the space that give you a visual representation of where all the audio objects are in the mix. An additional object parameter is size. So some of those little green balls will be little and some will be larger, or you might even see some increasing or decreasing in size. So again, you get the visual representation of the mix as well as a loudness measurement to make sure that your dialogue loudness is in compliance. So when I hit play here, you're going to see a little bit of animation like so. And while the mix is playing, it's very easy for the mixer to audition. How does it? Because you want to make sure that the Dolby Atmos mix sounds good in every configuration. So it's very easy to quickly knock between, okay, there's my 7.1, there's my 5.1, there's a 2-channel. And there are hotkeys for all of this so that while the mixer is mixing, they can hit those hotkeys and very quickly listen in Atmos, listen to 5.1, listen in stereo. So that is how it works. Now, in terms of object panning, let me show you that briefly. Let me open up a panner. Let's grab this guy here. So in the Dolby Atmos mix, every object track has one of these panners. And this is what I like to say about the Dolby Atmos toolset. It's really powerful, but it's not really complicated. If you're already an experienced mixer working in 5.1, if you already know how to use inserts like EQs or compressors or panners, if you know how to write automation, the Dolby Atmos mixing tools are really easy because you have one of these panners, except instead of just being an XY panner, it's a 3-dimensional panner. If I grab this ball right here and move it around the room, you're also going to see it move around the room in the renderer. So I'm going to grab this guy and move it around like so. And you see it moving around the ceiling. Now the Z-axis is controlled with the height knob right here. So if I move that down, you'll see it go up and down like so. And like I mentioned, there's also that size parameter. So right now, say I have a mono track like a rainstorm. Well, I pin it up to the top center of the room and then I open up the size parameter and it's now filling the entire overhead plane with that sound. So let me turn that back down. There are also helper modes. Now you can map the controls to a work surface, like say do XY panning with a knob and then maybe the Z-axis with a fader, or right in the panner itself, there are helper modes. For example, right now I'm in freehand, but if I go to dome mode, and then when I go from the front of the room to the back of the room, it automatically goes up, kisses the ceiling, and then comes back down again when you hit the back of the room. Same thing happens side to side. So those are just the ways that the panner kind of helps you out a little bit so that you don't need 3 hands to run everything. And in a nutshell, that basically is how you do a Dolby Atmos mix and how simple it is to basically take an M&E, which like we said earlier, studios are already creating Dolby Atmos M&Es, fully filled M&Es and putting them on the shelf. We're not seeing widespread adoption of using those Atmos M&Es for international dubs. But they're there. The M&Es are there, the international dialogue stems are there, and it's not really a much heavier lift to create a Dolby Atmos international dub than it is to create, say, a 5.1 dub like we've been doing for years and years. So that's the end of my demonstration. I'm going to bring Javier and Rich and Ron back, and Chris, and let's look down the questions and start the Q&A. So thank you all for watching that, and let's get going on the questions.
Yeah, so thanks guys, and thanks everyone for your attention. We do have a few questions that have come in. I'm gonna sort of wade through a few of them and maybe I'll toss them out. The first one is for Javier. You spoke a lot about the Atmos device penetration story in Europe. And the question is, are you seeing similar trends in other parts of the world, like Asia or Latin America, in terms of increasing penetration of Atmos devices versus 5.1 devices? Do you have a sense of the other territories?
Yeah, I do have a sense. I think the US and Europe are clearly ahead in penetration. So the data in those other markets may not be as high. However, some of the global brands like Sony and Panasonic have actually made all the 4K TVs Atmos capable. So there are a lot of markets in Latin and in Asia where Philips is a big brand. That's made by TPV, which is a company that makes all the TVs in Atmos. I understand Sony also has some very good markets in LATAM and Asia. So it really goes market by market. In the markets where some of these global brands have been successful, I think you will find higher penetration. Now, I know our India team is now working a lot of the local manufacturers to bring them on board, and the team is pretty much doing the same. And our ambition as a company is that eventually all the TVs made in 4K should be in Atmos. So yeah, I showed you the European example, which is maybe slightly ahead of the curve, but we're definitely also working in Latin and Asia.
Great. Thank you. We got a few questions here that I think are probably for Tom. Tom, there's one question. I've seen all the new Atmos studios lately, but all of them look extremely expensive to build. Is it necessary to have a really high quality monitor system? Or can I build an Atmos studio with a lower cost multiple output interface and home studio monitor speakers?
The short answer is yes, you can. I mean, you always want the most accurate monitoring possible, but just like in any mix room, you're not EQing or balancing your room because it's Atmos. You're just EQing or balancing the room so that it's an accurate listening environment. As long as you have a B chain controller or EQs that can tune the room so that all the speakers perform roughly equivalently in terms of EQ curve and loudness, yeah, you can use a mix and match system. I hope that answers it. We don't want to be overly prescriptive about every single speaker must be the exact same make and model. But you just want to get as close as possible to a properly calibrated room so that you know that your mix is going to translate when it goes to different environments. You always want to start from the most accurate listening environment possible. So I hope that answered the question.
And speaking of monitoring your mix, there's a question about whether it's okay to use a soundbar to do Atmos QC, and this gentleman's particularly interested in a Yamaha soundbar.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a feature that's in a mastering suite, production suite that I love. We have an export to MP4 function in our renderers, and if you used to mix music, again, I'm going to date myself, in a certain era, once you finished your mix, the very first thing you'd do was you'd print it to a cassette tape, and then you'd run outside to the driveway and listen to it in your car and see how it sounds in a consumer environment. We have the Dolby Atmos equivalent of that with our export to MP4 function in the renderer, and where you can take your Dolby Atmos master file and export it encoded to Dolby Digital Plus, which is the codec that is used on most streaming services, and it wraps it in an MP4 container. You can then take that encoded file, put it on a thumb drive, and then put it in a consumer system, like directly into a television or a Blu-ray player or something like that. And you can play it as a file in that consumer system. So right after you finish your mix, you can get that immediate feedback on how it sounds in a consumer environment. So to answer your specific question, can you do QC on a soundbar? Yes, you can. I think you always want to QC in as high a speaker count format as possible, just for the most resolution and clarity. But yeah, a soundbar can give you a typical consumer experience. So as long as there is the understanding with your client that that is going to be your QC environment, I would say that's a valid way to work.
Yeah, there was a very similar question about.
Hey, Ron.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Ron, I just want to interrupt you for 1 second. Sorry.
Sure.
One thing we should probably direct people to before we lose folks too is, we do have this professional.dolby.com site, which I'll put in the chat box because it's got a wealth of information and tutorials and, a bunch of things you can actually research on your own. And I just don't want to lose people. So I'll put it in the chat box just so make sure people can actually get access to that if you want to just bookmark it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, it looks like we have a lot of questions for Tom.
Bring it on.
Yeah. Can we have a home studio for cinema content? I guess sort of the question is kind of related to the difference between a cinema Atmos mix and a home Atmos mix.
Yeah. So a cinema master file can be converted to a home Dolby Atmos master file, and it can then be encoded directly for home entertainment. If you're on a budget, that is a valid workflow. You can take a cinema mix and do the file type conversion to a home Atmos and then send it directly on. Sometimes with a cinema mix, you might want to make certain creative tweaks. For example, constraining the dynamic range a bit. Movie mixes can go from very loud to very quiet, whereas in a home environment where you have the kids playing in the next room and cars driving by outside, you don't want that dynamic range to be that wide. So you might want to do a home entertainment mix pass just to bring in the dynamic range and maybe change some of the panning to reflect that speakers in the cinema are behind the screen, whereas cinema speakers for home, your left and right are outside the screen. So you might want to toe in some of your pans. So creatively, you might want to do a near field mix pass, but technically, yes, you could use a cinema mix directly for home. And by the way, those mix tweaks that I described, you're not having to do those because they're Atmos. You would have to do the same type of mix tweaks for, say, a 5.1 theatrical mix. It's so you're doing the fixes because you're going from cinema to home, not because it's Atmos.
Right. There's a question about objects. Is there a best practice to preserve object dialogue track automation? I've seen sessions using track sheets, but that seems to be slowing down the recording session.
I would say that most dialogue isn't really in the object tracks. Most dialogue is typically mixed in the bed tracks. One place you'll see dialogue in objects is in animation, because there's usually more dynamic dialogue panning and kind of wackier things happening with dialogue in the animation world versus the live action world. So most mixes I've seen, again, the dialogue is in beds, but for animation, I've seen really extensive use of objects where every character has its own track lane, and basically the dialogue is individually cut up and dropped into those lanes. For movies where you're doing lots and lots of international dubbing, it can be a time saver, but I understand the concern about slowing down the recording session. I think you could still record as you would, but then it's just an editorial process to drop the dialogue tracks into the correct object lanes where the automation already exists. And that preserves the creative intent of the original mix in terms of where physically those dialogue lines are being steered. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think there's sort of a related question. Is the track management the same with 5.1 as it is in Atmos?
The track management is whatever you'd like it to be. I've seen, you do your bed mixes, but then the object mixes, say it's a really big production where you have separate effects and dialogue and music editorial. The edit team might agree, okay, object tracks 11 through 32 are going to be for dialogue, and object tracks 33 through 100 are going to be for effects, and then 101 through 128 are going to be for music. I think as long as you have a plan going into a big show, you can do your track allocation so that nobody is colliding with anyone else. And you can also checkerboard your events in the object tracks. You don't have to have a single object in the track and then that track is burned for the entire show.
Okay, I think there's a question about rendering out your 5.1 and 7.1 deliverables from the Atmos file. The question is, are the majors, I assume that means major studios, are the majors accepting a down mix of their features directly from Atmos, or are they demanding a fresh remix in 5.1 and 7.1?
I think when Dolby Atmos was brand new and there was concern about the quality of the down mix, how well a Dolby Atmos mix would translate to, say, stereo, there was a much more concern about that. And it's understandable because you are putting, 50 pounds of stuff in a 2-pound bag. But we really thoughtfully laid out our re-render parameters in terms of how Dolby Atmos mix re-renders down to 5.1 or stereo. When Dolby Atmos for Home started, yeah, they didn't necessarily trust the Atmos mix. It was kind of its own project. And then a 5.1 or a 2-channel was, say a 5.1 was the primary mix, and then they did a 2.0 from that. Leading re-recording mixers these days are saying, no, you know what? I'm really happy with how the Dolby Atmos mix down mixes to 5.1 or stereo. And, if you're doing a disc, you can save space in the disc by just providing the Atmos. From a file management perspective, streaming services like to have one master deliverable versus 10 different deliverables per show. So I think as time goes on, there's been a lot more trust in the quality of how the Atmos mix down mixes to a channel-based output.
Okay, we have time for a few more questions. Thank you for everyone staying. I think we're a little over the scheduled time, but we're happy to keep going for a few more minutes. Tom, can the Dolby Atmos mastering suite run on a separate computer to reduce the load on the main mixing machine?
Mastering suite, yes, it explicitly runs on its own computer. Dolby Atmos production suite will only run on the same computer as the DAW because you're using internal busing to get the audio from the digital audio workstation to the renderer. So that is strictly an internal configuration thing. There's no way to use the production suite on a separate machine from the DAW. But mastering suite, yes, it is explicitly a machine for the renderer and a machine for the DAW.
Okay, Tom, you're a popular guy here today. Tom, for exporting Atmos files to deliverable WAV files, does it export all bed tracks plus the maximum number of objects, or does it vary based on how many objects are utilized?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Let me read it. Here, for exporting Atmos files to deliverable waves, does it export all beds? So if you're exporting Dolby Atmos master files to, say, a 5.1 or 7.1, there are a couple of ways you can go about it. You can set up the input configurations in the renderer so that different object tracks are identified as, say, dialogue or music or effects. And so the renderer knows what stem everything belongs on. So yes, if you set up your input configs into the renderer correctly, you can output a full mix in whatever channel config you specify, or individual stems, which combine the dialogue, music, and effects, plus their relevant bed tracks. So that yes, from a Dolby Atmos master file with properly set up input configs between the DAW and the renderer, you could output full mixes, say just dialogue stem, just music stem, just effect stem, or maybe just M&E. Yes, all that's possible based on your renderer input config settings.
Okay, there's a question about monitoring on headphones. When listening, mixing, and rendering in binaural, does the final mix need a Dolby Atmos decoder to listen back?
So the final mix is a full Dolby Atmos master file with binaural settings. It's still early days in the binaural world. Some folks are mixing Dolby Atmos and then printing it as 2-channel, basically pre-baking the binaural into a stereo mix. That's kind of a for now solution. We see, well, actually, let me step back a bit. Music streaming services are delivering the full Dolby Atmos or the Dolby codec with the full Dolby Atmos mix so that it is a proper Atmos playback environment. Some providers, podcasts, for example, are currently transmitting Dolby Atmos, although it's not identified as Atmos, but mixers are already using mixing tools and then basically pre-baking a binaural mix, and then it's being delivered as 2-channel. We do envision that Dolby codecs are going to get enabled on podcast platforms, and that's really going to open up some exciting possibilities in terms of delivering Dolby Atmos for audio-only entertainment, even beyond music. So did that answer the question? I ramble sometimes.
Yeah, I think we have time for one last question, and this is one I think it's actually bringing it right back home again to getting enabled, and that is, can you repeat one more time the main differences between Dolby Atmos Production Suite and Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite? Because our guests here have both options to become equipped, right?
Sure. Yeah. So Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite is the high-end solution. It runs on its own separate machine, and it's available to run on either Mac or PC. And the physical I/Os that connect the digital audio workstation machine to the renderer machine can be Marty or Dante. So typically you would go to one of our worldwide resellers, and they would put together a package for you with all the correct hardware in the machine, and have the software preloaded for you. In the US, the typical cost is in the mid single thousands of dollars, depending on if you go Mac, PC, high-end Mac Pro, or even Mac Mini it will run on. And then Dolby Atmos Production Suite is the software-only solution, $299 US from the Avid store, and it runs specifically on a Mac on the same machine as the DAW.
Okay, so I think we're just about out of time here. I really want to thank everyone. I want to thank Chris and the EGA. We do have a few more questions. I'm not sure if Chris or Tom, what would be the best way for interested folks to send some additional questions even after we wrap up?
Yeah, you can. Everybody can send questions to membership at egassociation.org, and we will get them to our Dolby folks. Also, I imagine some people are already quickly looking at LinkedIn and finding Tom's profile, and we'll probably reach out to him directly. So I think probably
I always get a little spike after an event like this.
yeah, so probably all those things are available. But yes, we will try to answer and find the appropriate resource to answer these questions, and we'll keep a log of them. And if we can find people, we'll share those with you as well at Dolby.
And the Dolby website also has a great knowledge base specifically for users of Mastering Suite and Production Suite. And at professional.dolby.com, learning.dolby.com, the learning site actually has a full Dolby Atmos mixing tutorial soup to nuts. And Avid also just announced their own Dolby Atmos training and individual engineer certification program that they're in the process of launching. And so lots of different ways to get info on mixing Dolby Atmos.
So great, Chris, I'll throw it back to you if you want to close us out, but thank you again.
Yeah, just again, thank you everybody for attending. We hope you found it useful, and keep an eye on other events. We actually have an event next week with Blackmagic, where they'll be talking about the Resolve product that Tom mentioned. So probably a little bit more on Atmos next week if you attend that event. So thank you very much, Dolby, for a great event, and we hope to hear Atmos all around the world very soon. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.